Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our February session for a year-long HSI webinar called Centering Servingness. I'm Carla Silva, and I serve as a director for HSI initiatives at the University of Arizona. I'm super excited that our community today includes colleagues not just from the University of Arizona, but also from Northern Arizona University, which I think just really showcases, right, the constant need for working collaboratively and together, especially within our state of Arizona. And as you know, we are all the three in-state public institutions are HSIs as well, which is really exciting that we're able to say that. So again, I just want to begin by recognizing and paying honor to the original inhabitants on the land of which the University of Arizona resides on. So our region here in Tucson includes ancestral homelands of the Tohono O'odham Nation and the Pasquayaqui tribe. We offer our gratitude in being able to share knowledge on these indigenous lands. We are informed by Dr. Gina Garcia's extensive body of work on the concept of servingness. And this is year 5 for our webinar series. So we've been doing this for quite a while, but we are always looking at kind of bringing in different folks, not just from, the University of Arizona, but from the state and even nationally, if you caught some of our other webinars. Our goals really are we've got 3 kind of overarching goals. One, we want to spotlight any current scholarship, right? So that we can offer examples. So how can maybe you at your institution or in the space that you are in take, right, these different ways of servingness and enact them, whether, as faculty or staff. We also invite others, right, again, both on our campus, off campus, and nationally to learn about and engage in the efforts. And then lastly, we're really just trying to build knowledge. It can sometimes feel like we're siloed or we're in our bubbles, right? And so this is an excellent way to, again, just learn about what's going on and continue to build that knowledge. Just a quick little history around the University of Arizona. We received our designation in April of 2018, and we were the first four-year public university in the state of Arizona to be recognized as such. Since then, we have been recognized with the Seal of Excellencia by Excellencia in Education 3 different times, so we're very proud of that. Most recently in 2025, we received their most recent seal. So really just showing, how us as a university are centering our students, how we are serving them in different ways, whether while they're here with us, while we're helping them prepare for graduate school or the workforce. So I'm really excited today because we were chatting a little bit actually right before we hopped on the webinar of just, this project that these folks have been working on for quite some time, but that they were able to kind of check back in, right, with the project themselves. So again, thank you all for joining us. And so today's webinar is Understanding and Improving Transfer Across Arizona, a Tri-University Data Collaborative. So the 3 four-year public institutions, so Arizona State University, Northern Arizona University, and the University of Arizona, along with Arizona Innovation Alliance, Alliance. So I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Kendra, and she will do some introductions and move forward with the webinar. Please also know that we will leave some time at the end for Q&A, but if you have a question that pops up and you're like, I don't want to lose it, feel free to throw it in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll make sure to come back to it once we reach that. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Kendra.
Thank you so much, Carla, for that wonderful introduction. We're delighted to be here. My name is Kendra Thompson-Dyck, and I have the pleasure of serving as Director of Assessment and Research here at the University of Arizona in a unit called Student Success.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dr. Carmín Chan, and I serve as the Vice Provost of NAU Online at Northern Arizona University.
Hello, my name is Tilbrook. I serve as a research analyst in assessment and research, where I work with Kendra and Elisa.
Hi, everyone. My name is Elisa Sperandio, and I serve as senior analyst.
We're so glad to be here to tell you a little bit of about a project that, as Carla mentioned, was numerous years in the making. So the Arizona Innovation Alliance was a collaboration between ASU, NAU, and U of A that was grounded and centered out of the Arizona Board of Regents. our public state university governing body. And although the Arizona Innovation Alliance in its original format with kind of paid centralized staff and staff at each institution has since sunset, the collaboration that was developed and the innovations that ensued through Arizona Innovation Alliance are very much alive. And what this alliance aimed to do was to increase collaboration between the universities and to anchor innovations around the three goals that you see here: to improve overall student success, particularly paying attention to traditionally underserved populations; to share insights related to student support that could be scaled across the institution, so sharing expertise, particularly around teaching and student support innovations; and the third goal being to optimize resource allocations to make education affordable for the students that we serve in Arizona. And one of the ways in which the Arizona Innovation Alliance did its work was bringing together groups of experts from each of the three institutions into smaller learning studios. So I served on a predictive analytics and student success learning studio, and Carmín was on an academic student success center, which had monthly meetings where we gathered together and talked about shared challenges, shared opportunities, and projects that each of the institutions was doing centered around these ideas. In the summer, we came together in person in Flagstaff to really ideate on what we had learned over the course of the term through these conversations, and to develop out calls for proposal for a pilot grant funding. And really the chance to both be in the room with other experts around kind of shared challenges, and then coming together to cross-pollinate those ideas really led to both frank conversations about what we knew and what we didn't, and opportunities to move the needle in very specific ways. So one of the conversations that surfaced at the learning studios and in that retreat was really centered around transfer students. And in the state of Arizona, there's a lot of great work happening for vertical transfer, that is 2-year to 4-year college transfer, and a lot of conversations as well between the community college. But what we realized was that there was less emphasis and conversation happening about what might be going on between our institutions. That is, students who might start at Northern Arizona University and for one reason or another desire and need to transfer to one of the other two public institutions. So a curiosity that came out of the learning studios then became a dig into the data. And as it relates to centering servingness, we learned that HSIs are really doing more than their fair share of transfer student service. HSIs enroll 1/4 of all community college transfers, despite only enrolling 16% of first-year students. So we knew that HSIs were already having an outsized impact in the transfer experience, and it was worth learning more. We also learned that HSIs were showing stronger transfer outcomes. HSIs were more likely than their peers to graduate those community college transfers, with this 58% grad rate compared to a national average of 52%. And when we dug further, we noted that there was really a lack of research on this lateral transfer experience, though it was quite common. So in the transfer landscape, we talk often about swirl, so students going between multiple institutions in sort of a haphazard way. But in our deep dive into literature, we noted that not only was lateral transfer a relatively common experience, but there was some data to suggest that rather than being happenstance, that lateral transfer experiences from a same type of institution, so 2-year to 2-year or 4-year to 4-year, was indeed more of a strategic and purposeful experience. This led us to develop the project motivations that anchored the funding that we received from the Arizona Innovation Alliance to engage in this data collaborative. And it was really foundational basic questions. What do we know about lateral transfers between these three public universities? And are there opportunities to improve degree completion in the state when we take a closer look at this unique pathway? We came together and authored this collaborative project with sort of two central aims in mind. One was to do a deep dive into the focal data analysis project, looking at those lateral transfer experience. But we also had the opportunity to pilot a data collaborative that was going to take sort of an innovative approach in terms of logistics. So rather than, and my colleagues will expound upon this later, rather than developing a data sharing agreement where we would all put the raw data together, align it, make sense of it, knowing that that is a time and labor intensive and very bureaucratic process, we decided to offer a different approach, which would be to conduct independent but coordinated analyses across the institutions, where each institution would do their own data work, but in such a way that our insights could talk to the insights being shared from the other institutions. The way we structured our team pilot was to have Carmín and I anchored as co-PIs of the project. We then ensured that we had project liaisons from Arizona State University, Jennifer Wilkin and Alicia Radetz, and our own Elisa from the U of A, who helped to ensure that we were having the right conversations, that projects were done in a timely manner, and that we had a shared understanding of the steps it would take to get this project across the finish line. We then engaged a number of folks in an analytical team, and Ned Tilbrook from the U of A took the lead in spearheading this conglomerate, which, as you see, included analyst folks from each of the institutions, some of whom were centered through the IR shop, others in assessment units like ours, and still others in enrollment management or other functions. And the last piece was that we structured our team with a transfer advisory board comprised of transfer experts at each of the institutions, knowing that we couldn't make any change without understanding both the context within our own respective institutions and the larger dynamics across the state. We wanted to make sure we had folks who could enact change and also had the on-the-ground expertise to inform our work.
Thanks, Kendra. So as Kendra alluded to, I think really some of the pieces of this project that were particularly unique was the data sharing approach, which really was a cyclical process where we really, acknowledge some of the limitations or challenges that are associated with sharing raw data amongst our institutions. And instead of relying on a master central data set, we coordinated independent analyst teams within the University of Arizona and ASU who conducted parallel work, essentially coordinating their efforts, asking the same questions, looking for the same variables in their respective independent data warehouses, and then being able to come back and share results, calibrate together, and ultimately be able to find notable insights in our respective approaches. So this really allowed us to, again, be able to generate insights that allows us to be able to act on these insights quickly, and at the same time, it was an alternative approach to some of the more bureaucratic laden data sharing agreements that our institutions have other experiences with as well. And so with that said, when we thought about the data sharing approach, again, it really was a cyclical process. So whereas the previous slide kind of shows it as though it's a very linear process, really, it started with an exploratory and kind of planning focused phase that was really about coming together across our teams and aligning on our research questions, ensuring that we were each digging in and looking for the same things in our respective data warehouses, and making sure that we had a shared agreement about what we were trying to learn and focus on. And so again, Kendra spoke earlier about the research questions we were focused on. And then we moved into an execution phase where then the teams engaged in data work respectively. Again, Ned played an instrumental role in helping to coordinate those efforts and where there were regular check-ins, but ultimately being able to answer those research questions independently within our data ecosystems with shared definitions and an aligned understanding. And then we brought the teams together in order to share out the results with the teams and also with our transfer advisory board and making sure that, again, we were understanding and contextualizing our findings with transfer experts, as well as being able to see where there may have been nuances in our data. Again, even though we had the same questions in mind and the same variables, we learned, through this process that sometimes when we got into the weeds of the different data definitions, there were some nuances there that were important to unpack and discuss together. Then once we had that opportunity to calibrate, we were able to come up with a second round of questions that allowed for follow-up research and again use that same approach where there was aligned definitions going on independently executing the data analysis work and then ultimately coming back together and contextualizing that information together. And then finally, towards the end of the project, we had the opportunity to share out findings with stakeholders, both on our transfer advisory board as well as with other public stakeholders like the Arizona Transfer Conference and through other professional organizations in the data focused areas. So as I alluded to, this really was a cyclical process, right? So it starts with generating questions, having the opportunity to engage in that work independently, share back the results and aggregate the findings together. Again, the findings being what we're sharing out, not the raw data. Using that to help generate new questions that allow us to go deeper and be able to kind of further investigate interesting findings, and then ultimately having that process repeat itself again. And so it really, again, it required, a close coordination amongst our teams, but also allowed for a really collaborative approach. And so with that said, the team in the first phase, we really focused on two main buckets of questions. First and foremost was, recognizing that lateral transfers are a relatively understudied student population, and we ourselves needed to do some deeper understanding about how frequent or how many tri-U lateral transfer students there were and what were some of the unique characteristics of this particular transfer population. And then looking, again, closely at what some of the patterns of behavior were once they arrive at their other institutions. So do they change majors and how do their outcomes compare to other more general, the other vertical transfer populations that are more common? And ultimately looking to see if lateral transfers had different degree completion outcomes. Again, looking at not only how many of them get across the finish line, bringing credits from across our three public institutions across Arizona, but also looking at different patterns of how much of their transfer credit and degree completion units were coming from across the Tri-U credit ecosystem. And we mentioned again that's a cyclical approach and we had opportunities to calibrate together. The team really took advantage of the Arizona Transfer Summit convenings, which are an annual conference for transfer focused higher ed professionals across the state to come together. And so we had an opportunity to be able to sort of piggyback off of that event by pulling our collective teams together, using that as an opportunity, again, to calibrate our findings, but also in the later stages of the project to be able to share out those findings with colleagues across the state and use that as an opportunity for ongoing dialogue. So again, really, fostering opportunities for collaboration was a key, and we did that both virtually as well as in person. And then finally, I mentioned that in the second phase, we did a deeper dive. And in this kind of secondary phase of the project, we looked in particular at how the enrollment pathways of lateral transfer students may have included gaps in their enrollment, recognizing sometimes students may have stopped out of one of the Tri-U schools due to life circumstances or other situations. They may have needed to take a pause and then potentially jump back into coursework at a later time through one of the other Tri-U schools. So we suspected that that may have been a pattern of behavior. We wanted to let the data speak for itself, and so had an opportunity to look at the kind of the cadence or progression of students and understanding that from a time perspective. And then we also, again, thinking about it from that stop out perspective, wanted to better understand and investigate how many students stopped out and haven't yet transferred to another institution. So unrealized Tri-U transfers. Again, when we think about the population of students with some college, no degree, this is a really critical, population that all three of our universities collectively are eager to serve and help to get them across the finish line.
Cool. Hey everyone, I'm going to talk through our data in a little bit more detail and some of our kind of high level results. So we had two really main data sources here. So for each institution, we had our own institutional data. For us, obviously, we were drawing really heavily on U-Access Analytics here at the U of A. And so this was for a lot of those routine measures that we use really commonly in the kind of analyses we do frequently. So things like the demographic data. We got some data on their admissions and the amount of credits that they had, and that they had a graduation as well. We'll get a bit more into that later. And then we also use the National Student Clearinghouse primarily to look at those students who transfer out, where they end up out of our institutions, as well as those who might have been omitted from another Tri-U institution, but then kind of ended up going somewhere else too. So to start off, just, what kind of population are we talking about here? Well, this graph is going to show us the percentage of the breakouts of what kind of transfer students we're looking at in the populations at U of A and ASU in our sort of maximum study period, 2018 to 2023. Some of our analyses have a more narrow time period, and I'll note those as we go on. But across that 5-year period, you'll see that 70% of incoming transfer students at U of A and 60% at ASU were community college transfers, and then the rest, so about a third overall, being lateral transfers. Now, of those lateral transfers, only a much smaller percentage, 4% at U of A and 2% at ASU, were tri-university transfers from one of those other two schools. However, it's a small percentage, but we're still talking about overall several hundred students a year transferring in this way. And so it's a small population, but it's an in-state population that might have some kind of unique challenges or needs. So very much the sort of thing that AIA is aiming to help with in its mission. So then we'll have we had a look at, who are these people demographically? What kind of patterns are we seeing among tri-university transfers? And one of the biggest things we found was this geographical piece, right? Where we found that so for those who were transferring to U of A, they were much more likely to have graduated from a Pima County high school than other lateral transfer students. And the same was true for students transferring into ASU, having graduated from a Maricopa County high school. So those who they're essentially transferring to the institution located closest to where they went to high school. A lot of these folks, they're also more likely to be in-state residents. So there does seem to be a bit of a theme here of students maybe returning home. The maximum kind of study period does cover the pandemic. That may have had an effect on kind of some people's decisions in that way as well. And then they're also a bit more like new first-year students as a kind of group than other transfer students and those other laterals and those community college transfers, in that they're from local high school, but also if we go to the next slide, I think that'll show this in a little more detail. But also we see full-time, they are on a par with new first-year students, 76 to 77%, but other transfer students much less likely. In terms of coming from the high school in the county that they're transferring into, it's higher than new first-year students by 20 percentage points. And then also their in-state residency is also that bit higher than new first-year students, but also other transfers as well, 81% of these being in-state residents compared to just over half of new first-year students. Yeah, so then we had a look at what are their outcomes after they do transfer, and actually overall they do pretty well. They had higher one-year retention rates at both institutions than other transfer groups. When we looked at graduation rates, it was a little bit more of a mixed picture, but still overall pretty positive. At the U of A, our tri-university group had higher 1, 2, and 3-year grad rates than other 4-year than other lateral transfers, but a little bit lower than community college transfers. At ASU, it was a slightly simpler story where, you know, the graduation and retention rates were that bit better than other transfers across the board. So they're doing pretty well, but then there was one thing that caught our eye in terms of their credits at graduation that was a little different here. And this is something where the pattern's a little bit different between the two institutions, but overall what we do see is that Tri-U transfers are graduating with credits over that 120 line. I will also say here that this is only students with a single degree and a single major. So these are the ones that we more or less know needed 120 credits or thereabout for graduation, right? At U of A, it is they have the highest of any of these four groups: the non-transfers, the community college transfers, the lateral transfers, and the Tri-U transfers. At ASU, they're the second highest, so that bit lower. I will say, because I know the U of A data very well, we did see a spike in the students graduating in the kind of year or two after the pandemic. So it's perhaps those like unplanned transfers and bringing in a lot of extra credits. Next slide, please. So where do they go? So in terms of looking at our transfer out outcomes after this, we decided this is one analysis where we really honed in on one specific year. We looked at those students who left in spring and fall of 2022 and where they were at in the next semester, right? So in terms of like those students who haven't graduated and haven't re-enrolled at U of A or ASU, whichever institution, the vast majority of them, around 85%, don't re-enroll anywhere the following semester. They may re-enroll somewhere else later, but what we're going to look at here is that 15%, 16% at U of A who do enroll somewhere else next term. So we see a lot with the community colleges in particular. The picture is a little different between U of A and ASU, but across both institutions, the most common 4-year destinations were Grand Canyon, Southern New Hampshire, and Western Governors. So we're seeing some of those private schools with a big online presence really being popular destinations across both. So here is the breakout of the transfer out types. So these are the percentages: ASU on the top, U of A on the bottom. And this is those who are leaving at the end of spring 2022 and fall 2022 combined into one, right? Now, some of these are pretty similar, but you will notice that the other community college, so the non-Arizona community college, that chunk is a lot higher for ASU, 27% compared to 14% at U of A. U of A also 13% of those leaving are going to another Tri-U compared to 3% at ASU. So we did notice some differences here, but then what we did was we given that ASU has a really large online presence, we decided we would split out ASU into in-person immersion and digital immersion, and this gave us this bar, right, which is a lot where we see the ASU campus bar in the middle there. Is that bit more similar to U of A? In particular, it's that other community college bar has kind of has come down to like 19% compared to U of A's 14%. And it's likely that this reflects that the ASU serves a much bigger sort of proportion of their students online, and so those students might be located anywhere in the country and have community colleges. Their local community colleges wouldn't necessarily be Arizona ones. We also see that the campus immersion, it's 5% of those transferring to other tri-universities, which is less than U of A, but still much more than the digital immersion. The next slide has the breakdown of which are the most popular transfer out destinations. And here I think we see a little bit more evidence for that thesis on the previous slide. Here, the red bars are community colleges, the blue ones are the other Tri-Us, and the yellow ones are other 4-year institutions. So looking at U of A's top destinations, transfer out destinations at the top, we see that really strong connection with PEMA. So perhaps a lot of students going there, earning some credits over 1 or 2 semesters and maybe coming back. And then ASU actually is the next top destination as well. Now, what we see, I think, quite interestingly here, you see that NAU is the 5th most popular destination for U of A, and that's got 63 going out, and PEMA 468 at the top. We see much more compression in that ASU top 5, right? It's 150 going to Rio Salado Community College, 152 to Mesa, and then Southern New Hampshire and Western Governors are the 4th and 5th ones. They're the most popular 4-year destinations, and they're around 100. And I can tell you from looking a little further down the list when we made these up, that what we do see is, you know, U of A has this one local community college system that has a really strong connection to, whereas ASU just has a lot of different ones where 100, 150 students transfer out to rather than 400, 500. So we see that like little more geographical diversity in terms of where the ASU students are transferring out to if they're transferring to a community college after ASU. And then I think I'm going to hand over after this one.
Hi, everyone. So now that we've told you a little bit about how this project came to be and what some of our findings were, we really wanted to take a step back and reflect on some of our key takeaways from, yes, the data at hand, but also the process as a whole. As my co-presenter mentioned, this was also an innovative, collaborative approach that we were taking. And so it was really important for us to take some time to reflect on how that went and how all of the steps that we've taken to ensure data alignment and played out. And so for anyone wanting to adapt or adopt a similar coordinated parallel approach, we would say the really data alignment is the pillar that made this project possible. And one big reflection for us at the end of this project was really the data alignment is not a moment or even several moments, but it's a continuous process that happens at various different intersections of the project. So as already mentioned, each team had to align on data sources, including our own institutional data warehouses, which operate differently, as well as national student clearinghouse data use. And so this includes, lots of data alignment questions at the analyst, level. So how far do we look back? How do we approach, pulling the data across different years versus looking at a year-by-year comparisons on certain questions, right? So all of those were really in the weeds data questions, but there were also, questions around the management of the project and how do we bring all of these disparate groups doing coordinated work together in an effective way. And so how do we genuinely know that we use the same definitions? That multi-phase approach that really brought us back together multiple times to review data together, be able to ask questions and interrogate our underlying assumptions at multiple intersections was really valuable on this aspect. We also knew going in that, there were a lot of data alignment questions that were top of mind for us doing data work within these institutions, but there would also be things that we would find out as we went. And so leaving enough openness, understanding that the data is never as straightforward as it seems. And so we need to both allow for more data alignment opportunities as they become needed, but also to give space to the analysts to surface new and interesting insights that we would have not foreseen going in. So because lateral transfer was understudied at our institutions, going in with an open enough view was really important. In terms of benefits, we saw many across the 2 years that we were collaborating on this project. And so first and foremost, certainly the cross-university partnership. So throughout this project, our teams had several, virtual, but also in-person opportunities to come together with colleagues from other institutions, which is a rare treat, I can say, for at least, some of us, and can be really helpful in building bridges for future collaboration. The process of institutional learning also allowed us to really appreciate and understand that institution, approach questions differently. And so the importance of laying out our assumptions as we go into these projects, of really being able to have conversations to understand the context that informed all of our work was really valuable, and also helped us broaden our perspective as to how to best serve our students statewide. Understanding alignment issues, again, if you work in the data world, it's likely not a new problem. It's a constant challenge that we are weighing. However, doing this type of collaborative work that is coordinated, so you don't get to peek at each other's work, right? You're communicating across the two, really allowed us to better understand how in future collaborative projects, we might also be able to, smoothen some of those alignment areas very proactively on the front end. And then lastly, but certainly not least, also project-based learning. So this was, again, an area just in the study of lateral transfer that just engaging in reviewing that data, diving deeper into those experiences generated lots of new questions that even though we, the time of the project ended, we still are able to independently explore at our institutions. Next slide. Thank you. In terms of challenges, with any approach, we have to weigh the benefits and the costs, right? And so certainly with this approach, it can feel like a lot of effort to engage in this kind of coordination. It sometimes may feel like doing things independently, so sort of a standalone institution might feel faster. Of course, there's also trade-offs to that approach. We would have missed out on the cross-institutional learning and connections, which were really, really valuable to understanding how the University of Arizona fits into this wider pathway, as a destination and a departure point, right? And the other trade-off is that one thing you might consider then, as opposed to the separate coordinated project, would be a data sharing agreement, as Kendra hinted at the beginning of the presentation. And while data sharing agreements often do allow that more, getting to review each other's data, the raw data, they often they involve the sharing of data, but not necessarily of expertise. And so certainly that's a trade-off. And also they can also come with longer timelines. Another challenge is that, within the higher education field, certainly as we face resource constraints, we think about funding challenges. We also might, depending on our unit, we might feel like we sometimes have, barely enough time to fulfill our own university's needs. And so engaging in this sort of partnership might seem beyond the scope. A trade-off is that it was really valuable for all of us, for both our individual institutional mission and then for our broader sort of scale thinking at the state level, to really understand these regional trends and how we are implicated in them. So there's a lot to learn from engaging in that collaborative. Before we transition to recommendations that emerged from the project, I wanted to very briefly spotlight a few related efforts. And so I wanted to start, this slide includes mention of two offshoot projects that came out of the AIA work at the University of Arizona. And so the first is a credit articulation data exploration that Annette has been leading along with transfer articulation experts at the University of Arizona. And this has really focused on credit articulation from fall 2022 and fall 2023 of incoming transfer cohorts. And so looking at both vertical and lateral transfer, finding that most students did have at least one course rejected and then 14% transferred in NPHEC. And so we at the University of Arizona are certainly continuing to drill down on transfer student success and figuring out how we can better support all transfer students, including lateral transfers. And then another offshoot at the University of Arizona was an IRB approved research study titled Motivations and Experiences of Lateral Transfer. This was a U of A only project that myself, Kendra, and Ned engaged in last spring here at the U of A. And so this was made possible by a generous grant by the National Region 6 Association, which allowed us to provide incentives for interviews and focus groups with students. And so we did this institutional data work, and we had lots of questions about how students were actually experiencing lateral transfers. What were some of the hurdles that they ran into when they reached our university? And so we really felt that it was important to follow up with a qualitative investigation of these questions. We did complete the study last spring. We're currently writing up results, and findings did really underline the importance of investigating lateral transfer pathways as a standalone pathway that is distinct and unique from vertical, and that specifically we focus more on the strategic dimension of lateral transfer. Thank you. Other related efforts at NAU and ASU. So at NAU, the university has been working since 2022 on the Arizona Team Alliance, locally known as A++, which is an innovative partnership, really exciting, between NAU, Arizona STEM Community College District, and the Arizona Commerce Authority. That's been really focusing on boosting post-secondary attainment rate. And so this is another example of how NAU is collaborating with other institutions across the state, as well as private entities and public entities to support the success of our students in the long term, beyond graduation. At ASU, the AIA project influenced the enrollment strategy. So a lot of the data that came out of the AIA project was used to inform other initiatives. Again, some that are listed here, but some that are beyond our time here today. Including the Arizona Comeback Initiative, Reservation Comeback, which again also has a goal of helping Arizona students finishing. Finally, we want to end by touching on some recommendations that came out of the project team. And so at the end of this presentation, we'll have a link to our project findings page, which includes a recommendation brief that we put together if you want to spend a little bit more time reading about these, but just very briefly. Some of the things that emerged from the study was certainly the importance of tracking and assessing tri-university transfer trends intentionally in order to figure out opportunities for streamlining pathways for this population. Another important aspect was the importance of offering upfront clarity on scholarship packages so students understand the financial realities of transferring. And we saw this on the qualitative project that we carried out at the University of Arizona, that there, especially with students who had originally applied at a tri-U university as a first-year student, and then opted to go somewhere else, to then return to that original tri-U and transfer back. There was often confusion around why they were no longer eligible for their initial first-time full-time student. And so ensuring transparency around that was certainly one of the recommendations. Another recommendation was exploring honoring the first-year merit aid offer for students who were admitted as first year, selected at other tri-university, and then opted to. As part of, again, intentionally tracking and assessing lateral transfers, also including more program and communication that are inclusive of the lateral transfer pathway towards students. So ensuring students know that if you transfer from a tri-U, the transfer student center is still for you, we're here to support you. Also monitoring time to degree and articulation for lateral transfer and encouraging very early conversations with the advisor to catch any hurdles. And finally, providing additional resources on degree pathways and articulation estimates, which is something that I know across all of our universities is the subject of a lot of great work. That is continuing to make it clearer for students how their credit transfers can be. I'm going to hand it off to Carmín to wrap up our presentation.
Thanks, Elisa. Yeah, we just wanted to underscore, I think some of the biggest and most valuable takeaways of this project was the opportunity for cross-institutional partnership and collaboration across our three universities. As public institutions of higher education in the state of Arizona, we all have a collective mission to want to support learners in our state and degree attainment, and recognizing that it's not always a linear, clean path for a student through their undergraduate journey. And so it's important for our institutions to work together to try to smooth those pathways as much as possible, and to help support students ultimately to get across the finish line in whatever combination of coursework that they need to complete. And then, of course, I think we really appreciated the opportunity to dig deeply into our lateral transfer student population and recognizing that, although this isn't an enormous population amongst our tri-U schools, when we look at lateral transfer more broadly, and inclusive of other types of four-year to four-year transfers, it can be a significant population. And so we have to sort of ask ourselves, those questions about understudied student groups and really try to better understand some of those unique nuances in the student journey. And so it was great to have that opportunity to do that for this population, and we encourage you to think about ways to do that in other arenas. And then last but not least, we included a QR code here, which goes to a wonderful landing page that includes research briefs and other publications that have come about, past presentations associated with this project, as well as contact information for all of our team members. And so definitely encourage you to follow up and find out more and reach out to any of us if you have additional questions or ideas for future collaboration. Otherwise, thank you so much.
Awesome.
I'll hand it back to Carla.
Yeah, thank you all. It was really exciting to see all of this kind of come together, and in the work that we do in HSI initiatives here at the university, and then obviously Marla working with your office and just kind of learning a little bit more about what you all have been doing. So, we definitely want, we have some time. We always leave that time at the end for Q&A or just questions about anything they talked about, anything you want to hear more about. So we'll leave it open there. And then they were able to throw down the link to that QR code that was listed towards the end. So if you're wanting to access that or to send that to folks, it is in the chat. And then we'll give it a few just to see if anyone has questions. I have some questions. And then we'll end just asking kind of our overarching question. So I'll give it a minute real quick. Oh, I see. Sorry. We're gonna, they were, sorry, the link is not there. I thought it was, my bad. The link should now be in the chat for everyone to see. Sorry, y'all. We accidentally posted it only to like hosts and panelists. So now it should be available to everyone. If it's not, let us know in the chat and we can resend that. Okay. So I'll ask a question and then, folks are still percolating. Happy to, have some time if that's still going on. So I'm just really curious, I am very lucky. I know everybody on this panel, and have worked with all of them in some capacity, but I'm just curious, whoever wants to answer, if multiple folks want to answer, when you were doing this project, you all talked about some of the challenges. Was there anything that maybe surprised you all then more so? So maybe something that wasn't listed in the challenges or some of the data analysis that you maybe weren't thinking would come through in the project.
I have something to offer, and I think Carmen and I can tag team on this. So you may have noticed that we started with a tri-university collaboration, and then the data that we reported were missing our NAU counterparts, and that was a reality of cross-institutional constraints. NAU is a much smaller institution than the others and had just less capacity in their IR shop at the time, and so that was a challenge that we pivoted around constraint wise. But I think what was interesting is that having Carmen at the table and others from NAU, even if they weren't able to fulfill kind of the data capacity, looking at what we could learn from the other two institutions, we were able to triangulate a lot and make sense of what was happening in the NAU, context as one of the three, even without their involvement at that same threshold. So a challenge, but I think we were able to still discern and have contributing NAU perspectives despite that. Carmen, do you have anything to add on that note?
Yeah, I would echo that. We alluded to the A++ project that's happening and is spearheaded by NAU. And in many ways, that was part of the reason why there wasn't capacity to add another kind of data intensive project, because that was underway and already mid-flight at the time when this opportunity presented itself. And so, again, I think the campus community certainly values those kinds of collaborative arrangements. We just, had to, be able to calibrate based off of, what was realistic in terms of our team's capacities at that time. Another piece I'll add, I think that I really appreciated about this project was Ned alluded to one of the findings, recognizing the importance, the sense of place and the geography element of some of the transitions between our trilateral transfers. I think that insight in my mind anyways, I think was really informed because Elisa brings a background where she's, her research experience really relies on that kind of geographic analysis. And that was something that it makes perfect sense. Like when we heard it, when we talked about it, I was like, of course that would make logical sense. But I think to ask the question, to know to look for that and to dig deeper into that, I think was really informed by, some of the wonderful kind of breadth of different perspectives that we all brought to the table as in our respective research areas and areas of expertise. And so it was neat to see how that could influence the kinds of questions we were asking and some of the findings that emerged.
really exciting about this project is that it was an opportunity for a lot of cross-functional collaboration too, not only cross-institutional. And so, both within the University of Arizona, we worked with folks working directly on transfer articulation, folks working with students that were like more interfacing with that side of that world. And our ASU partners that were sort of our counterparts were more in the IR shop side of the institution, which I think was just a really great opportunity for myself personally to just really, again, engage with these institutions, learn how the work happens and all of the moving parts that you need to be able to engage in order to be able to move this kind of work forward. It doesn't happen just with data if there's not that like buy-in to the follow through. So that was really exciting.
Yeah, I think I would echo a lot of what Elisa just said about we work with analysts at ASU who work in a slightly different kind of occupy a slightly different position within their institution. And as we noted, there's that kind of different position within the institution, and there's the difference of the institution that might have different kind of like working definitions, priorities, and so forth. So I think that although that could be really challenging at times, by the time we kind of got through the challenges and got to the end of this project, it was much better for having had those different perspectives, thinking about, okay, well, how do you think about where the students transfer out and what your graduation timelines are? How do you and then thinking about that geography piece, right? I think what was really satisfying about that is we kind of went like, oh, we're seeing this. Are you seeing this? And then they went back and looked at it and went, oh yeah, no, we are too, actually. So it was like, oh, maybe this is just a thing that we've noticed. It's like a quirk of us or whatever. And like, no, okay, we're able to see this across multiple institutions, across multiple years, and kind of like draw some kind of broader conclusions from that was a really cool thing to be able to do.
And that's so awesome. I think, it's exactly what you were saying, Ned, right? Like, it's like, oh, what's going on and like what's happening? And I know, like, for myself, my sister transferred between two of the public U of A and ASU. And so, even her experiences has been really interesting as like a higher ed professional, but also, right, the personal side with her when she was younger. So I think, yeah, I was really excited when you all did this project and to see what kind of came out of it. Yes, you can. And so I have one more question for you. I don't see any questions in the chat. I was curious, y'all have kind of like wrapped up all of this work, and we are curious just kind of, if you could expand this project or, continue on. I'm curious, like, is there anything that's like a dream, right? So almost thinking like big picture, what would you want to move forward with? Is there some type of data you want to look at more deeply? Is there a piece that you're like, we just couldn't fit it into this project, but I would love to see that, so like kind of future research or future data analysis.
I think one thing that we spoke a little bit about in the presentation at the end there is that we've kind of been able to have some like data offshoots already, and one thing we're that I've been doing lately is working on some stuff around credit articulation, and what's been exciting about that um, is just that what we've realized is there are corners of the kind of like data universe of the U of A that are very like underexplored, and that I think it's pushed us in some directions where not only are we, I mean, this is the whole point of the thing really, but like not only are we learning things, but we're really like helping kind of broaden the understanding of others who work in that area, hopefully. Obviously, like not always, conclusions aren't always surprising, right? But I think just kind of building that capacity, not just in a having the skills in the individuals able to do these analyses, able to do kind of assessment work and so forth, but expanding our capacity in terms of like what data is out there that are usable that we can kind of help people get into is really exciting as a kind of general offshoot of this work.
Oh, thank you. Oh, Kendra, go for it.
You'd asked us to dream big. So in addition to kind of the bit by bit work that we've been able to, the offshoots, if you will, that are flourishing and growing here, I think something like this. We did a really small scale pilot where all of our analysts were already doing their day jobs and then adding this as kind of a carve out. And I think there could be some merit to institutionalizing or, substantially resourcing a tri-university data collaborative hub, or, you know, a statewide inclusive of all institutions, you know, that had the kind of analytical rigor and resources and also coordination power, you know, through all of the great work that HSI consortium does, that it takes a lot of work to bring people together. So I do think that was the value of the AIA hub as it existed, was having those resources to do the coordinating. You know, so long term, I think those kinds of investments, especially at the ABOR level or the state level, really facilitate and allow this kind of work to happen and flourish.
Awesome, thank you. So, for folks who have attended our webinars, or for folks who are new, we always ask our panelists. We ask all our panelists kind of one big overarching question. So we're going to ask our panelists right now. You all again are welcome if everyone wants to answer. If some of you want to answer, however you feel most comfortable. But the question we love to ask all of our panelists, with the work that you're doing and really looking at it right from this kind of servingness perspective, what next steps do you think are needed to build institutional capacity around this topic, so the transfer and HSI servingness?
I guess I'll go first. I think that, you know, a big overarching goal I would love to see is for our institutions to be able to really view each other as partners, mutual partners, when we're working together to try to help support education attainment across the state. I think, you know, for a very long time, like we're sort of frenemies in a sense, right, across the three universities. But really, you know, at the end of the day, I think we all have the same kind of core mission of wanting to focus on supporting students and meeting their needs and helping them achieve their goals. And I would expand that, you know, even beyond the Tri-U, and recognizing the importance of our partnerships with community college partners and other key stakeholders across the state as well. We're all part of a bigger ecosystem. And so I think, you know, to Kendra's earlier point, like this kind of collaborative work doesn't just happen. It happens because the players at the table, you know, prioritize making time and space for this, and you know, dedicating resources for staff to be able to focus on these types of projects. But ultimately, I think this is really needed. You know, when we talk about higher education and being viewed as a valuable resource, we have to be able to show that we're working together in ways that are collaborative and supportive and student-centered.
Yeah, I think thinking about the ways in which our institutions can kind of can work together, one of the things we did see is that besides those people transferring out to a community college and transferring to other tri-universities, really what we saw a lot of was folks transferring to some of those big kind of private, predominantly online universities. And although we saw that a little bit more with ASU, just given their sort of like profile of online students, we did see it at the U of A as well. And so I think, you know, emphasizing the friends part, right, is that we kind of like, you know, if a student has like a family reason that they need to, you know, they went to NAU, but their families in Tucson and they have a personal reason they need to go back, then there's, you know, we're kind of all on the same team here to serve that student, right? Is I think the paradigm that we sort of like came to thinking about through this work, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really important to sort of being able to do this work even at the institutional level without thinking about the cross-institutional level is really like building in the time for that relationship building. You know, we might have the data analyst perspective, but we are not engaging, you know, with the processes, understanding like, what does it look like when a student transfers in? Like, how does it go through the system? How does it flow from here to there into the data systems that we can access? And that is really important because it affects how we receive data, how we get the data, right? The kind of data we're able to get. And so that doesn't happen, you know, with a short check-in. That happens with routine, like relationship buildings across departments. And that requires investment, that requires time. And so I think that making the time for those, you know, really capacity building efforts for all of us across the board is really important.
Awesome. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap up, but I want to say thank you so much to Carmen, Kendra, Elisa, and Ned for sharing their knowledge and the work that they had worked on for quite a while. It's super exciting. Again, the link for more, the collaborative, more information. Some of that information is all in the link that we posted a little bit ago that seems like everyone was able to access. So again, thank you all for being here today. We know that you're busy. We know that there's a lot going on at our institutions. And so you taking that time to present to us today is very meaningful to us. And again, just models that kind of authentic engagement, right, within the state of Arizona that we hopefully are going to see more of for years to come. So again, thank you to those who were able to also join us today. We know that you are also super busy, so thank you for taking time today to come and learn and engage and share some knowledge. Our next webinar is scheduled for March 19th, so in a month from now at 1 p.m. Arizona time. This time we'll be joined by Dr. Celeste Atkins and Dr. Nicole Marone, who will be presenting on the topic of Grad Cafe, innovating graduate student support through holistic, food-centered, community-based mentoring. As previously mentioned, this was recorded, so we will work in the next week to get it up on our YouTube page. That way that you all, if you all want to take a look at it again or send it off to any colleagues who weren't able to attend today, you are able to do that. So again, thank you all for joining us today, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. Bye, everyone.